Hi there. Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of our podcast. I'm Ben, and as always, I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. This podcast is designed specifically for people like you who are learning English, whether you're just starting out or looking to take your English to the next level. Isn't that right, Claire?
That's right, Ben. And hello, everyone. I'm Claire. We're so happy you're joining us again for another fun and informative episode.
So, Claire, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing really well, thanks. It's been a busy day, but I'm excited for our discussion today. And you, Ben?
I'm feeling great too, especially because today's topic is something that I know many English learners struggle with, and it's going to be a really helpful conversation. We're talking about something I've heard a lot from our listeners. I can understand English, but I can't speak it.
Yes, I hear that so often too. People say, I can understand when people talk to me. I can read articles or watch videos in English. But when it comes to speaking, I just freeze. It's a really common issue.
Exactly. I think for a lot of people, it can be frustrating. You've spent time learning vocabulary, studying grammar, listening to conversations, but when it's time to actually speak, it feels like you can't find the words. It's almost like your brain knows what to say, but your mouth won't cooperate.
Yep, I can feel that. It's like you have all the knowledge, but when it's time to put it into practice, you get stuck. But here's the good news. If you're feeling this way, you're definitely not alone. It's a really common experience for English learners, and it's something that can be overcome with practice and the right mindset.
Absolutely. In today's episode, we're going to talk about why this happens, and more importantly, what you can do to start speaking more confidently in English. We'll share some practical tips, personal experiences, and discuss how you can go from understanding to speaking fluently.
And as always, we have our vocabulary expert Nathan with us today. Nathan will be joining us in a bit to break down some of the key words and phrases we'll be using in today's conversation. Hey, Nathan.
My pleasure, Claire. And hi, Ben. I'm really looking forward to today's topic. There are definitely some useful words and expressions that will help our listeners as they work on speaking English more fluently.
Fantastic. We'll check in with you soon, Nathan. So let's dive right in, Claire. One of the first things I think we should talk about is why it can be so difficult to speak, even if you can understand English pretty well.
That's a great place to start. I think one of the biggest reasons is fear. Fear of making mistakes. When we learn a new language, we want to be perfect, right? We don't want to sound silly or make grammar mistakes. So what happens is, we stay quiet. We listen. We understand. But we don't practice speaking because we're afraid of saying something wrong.
Exactly. And that fear can hold you back from actually improving. The truth is, making mistakes is a part of the process. It's how we learn. No one expects you to speak perfectly from the start. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
I agree. Another thing that makes it hard is that speaking is a real-time activity. When you're listening or reading, you have time to think, to process the language. But when you're speaking, it's happening in the moment. You have to find the right words, put together the sentence and speak it out loud, all in just a few seconds. That can feel overwhelming.
Uh-huh. When you're speaking, you don't have the luxury of hitting pause to think. It's happening right now. But that's why it's so important to practice speaking regularly. The more you practice, the faster your brain becomes at finding the right words and constructing sentences.
And something else to keep in mind is that your passive skills, like listening and reading, develop before your active skills, which are speaking and writing. It's normal to understand more than you can say. Think about when babies learn to speak. They spend months listening to people around them before they say their first words. If you're looking to practice your listening and reading skills, you can check out our previous content about learning English through stories. It was specifically made for you to improve both listening and reading skills.
Exactly. Make sure to check them out. So it's natural that you might feel like you can understand English well, but not speak it as fluently. The key is to take that next step and start speaking more, even if it's just a little bit at first.
Yep, and you don't need to wait until you feel ready or until you think your English is perfect. Start speaking now. Even if it's just simple sentences, you're already making progress.
Definitely. Speaking is a muscle. You need to work it out to get stronger. All right, before we go any further, let's bring in Nathan to go over some key vocabulary from what we've talked about so far. Nathan, take it away.
Thanks, Ben. Let's take a closer look at some useful words and phrases from the conversation so far. Freeze. When you feel so nervous or unsure that you can't move or speak, like when people say they freeze when they try to speak English. Mindset. This refers to your attitude or way of thinking about something. Claire talked about having the right mindset when learning to speak English. Hold you back. This means to prevent someone from making progress. Ben mentioned that fear can hold you back from speaking English confidently. Luxury. This usually means something extra or special, but in today's context, Ben used it to describe something that isn't always available, like having time to think when speaking. Passive skills versus active skills. These are important terms when it comes to language learning. Passive skills, like listening and reading, are when you understand the language but don't produce it. Active skills, like speaking and writing, are when you use the language yourself. All right, those are the key words for now. Back to you, Ben and Claire.
Thanks so much, Nathan. I think that really helps our listeners understand those important terms in context.
Absolutely. And it's great to know those terms because they're such a big part of the language learning process.
All right, so let's keep going. We've talked about why it can be hard to speak even if you understand English well, but now let's talk about some ways to overcome that and start speaking more confidently.
Sure, let's get into that. One of the best ways to improve your speaking skills is to create opportunities for yourself to speak in English. It might feel intimidating at first, but the more you practice, the easier it gets.
Exactly. And one great way to do this is through language exchange. You can find someone who is a native English speaker and wants to learn your language, and you can take turns practicing. It's a really relaxed way to practice speaking without feeling too much pressure.
I love that idea. It's like you're both helping each other. Plus, it's fun because you're not just practicing English, you're also learning about someone else's culture.
Right. And if you can't find a language exchange partner, there are still other ways to practice speaking. For example, you can talk to yourself in English. It might feel strange at first, but trust me, it works. You can describe what you're doing, talk about your day, or even repeat phrases you hear in English shows or podcasts.
That's a great tip. You can even record yourself speaking. This way, you can listen back and see what you're doing well and what you need to improve. It's like having a conversation with yourself, and it really helps build confidence.
Another idea is to practice shadowing. This is where you listen to a native English speaker, like in a podcast or video, and then try to repeat exactly what they say, mimicking their pronunciation and intonation. It's a fantastic way to train your brain to think in English.
I love shadowing. It's a great way to improve your fluency because you're practicing how native speakers talk. Plus, you're learning new vocabulary and expressions in the process.
Exactly. And speaking of vocabulary, let's check back in with Nathan. Nathan, could you walk us through another segment of keywords?
Of course, Ben. Let's break down some more useful vocabulary. Intimidating. Something that makes you feel scared or nervous. Claire mentioned that speaking English can feel intimidating at first. Mimicking. This means copying someone's actions or speech. Ben talked about shadowing, where you mimic how native speakers talk. Pronunciation. How words are said or spoken. Pronunciation is a key part of speaking any language clearly. Fluency. This is when you can speak a language easily and smoothly without too many pauses. Shadowing. A technique where you listen to native speakers and repeat what they say, copying their tone, speed, and pronunciation. These words are important when thinking about how to improve your speaking skills. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks again, Nathan. Those are all super useful words to know, especially for learners who want to speak more fluently.
Yep. And now that we've covered why speaking can feel difficult and some great strategies to practice, let's also talk about building confidence. Because confidence plays a huge role in speaking a new language. If you don't believe in yourself, it can be hard to speak even when you know the words.
Absolutely. Confidence is key. And the good news is, confidence is something you can build over time. One thing that really helps is starting with small conversations. Don't feel like you have to have deep, long conversations in English right away. Start with short, simple exchanges. Maybe practice ordering food in English or greeting someone with, "Hi, how are you?" Small wins like this can boost your confidence.
That's a great point. I always tell learners, don't be afraid to celebrate the small victories. Every time you speak English, even if it's just one sentence, you're making progress. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll feel.
That's true. And don't forget, nobody is judging you as harshly as you might think. Native speakers don't expect you to be perfect. In fact, they'll often appreciate that you're trying to speak their language.
Exactly. It's important to remember that making mistakes is part of learning. Every mistake is an opportunity to improve. So don't let the fear of mistakes stop you from speaking. You'll get better with each conversation.
And speaking of conversations, something that can really help is focusing on communicating rather than trying to be perfect. Your goal when speaking should be to get your message across. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you're able to communicate and the other person understands, then you've succeeded.
Oh yes. Focus on connection, not perfection. The more you focus on getting your message across, the less pressure you'll feel to speak perfectly. And remember, most people will be patient and understanding if you're learning.
That's so true, Claire. Another thing that can help build confidence is to set small, realistic goals for yourself. Maybe your first goal is to introduce yourself in English. Once you've done that, maybe the next goal is to have a short conversation about your hobbies. By setting achievable goals, you'll feel more confident as you reach each one.
Exactly. It's all about taking small steps. And speaking of goals, it's also a good idea to track your progress. You could keep a journal where you write down the conversations you've had or the new words you've learned. Seeing your progress written down can really boost your confidence and motivate you to keep going.
I love that idea. Keeping a journal is a great way to see how far you've come, and it's a reminder that learning a language is a journey. It takes time, but with consistent effort, you'll get there.
Absolutely. So, to summarize, if you feel like you understand English but can't speak it, don't be discouraged. This is a normal part of the learning process. Remember to practice regularly, celebrate your small victories, and focus on communicating rather than being perfect. You'll get better in no time.
And most importantly, don't give up. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become. All right, I think we've covered some really great tips today, but before we wrap up, let's check in with Nathan one last time for a quick review of today's keywords. Nathan?
Thanks, Ben. Here's a final review of some important words we've discussed today. Confidence, the belief in yourself and your abilities. We talked about how confidence is key when learning to speak a new language. Communicating, sharing information or ideas with someone else. This is the main goal when speaking, even if it's not perfect. Celebrate small victories. This means recognizing and feeling good about your progress, even if it's just a small step forward. Set goals. Making small, achievable targets for yourself, like having a short conversation in English. Track your progress. Writing down what you've learned or achieved to see how far you've come in your language learning journey. These are all great concepts to keep in mind as you work on improving your speaking skills. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks, Nathan. You always do such a great job of breaking things down for us. Right, Claire?
Yes, thanks so much, Nathan. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us today. We hope this episode has been helpful and inspiring for you as you work on becoming more confident in speaking English.
Absolutely. We believe in you, and we know that with practice and the right mindset, you'll be speaking English confidently in no time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode, and feel free to send us any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in the future.
Yep, we love hearing from you. We'll try our best to provide you with the efficient tools to make learning English fun. Keep practicing, and remember, every time you speak, you're getting better. See you in the next episode.
Take care, everyone, and happy speaking.